You think you found this. You think you were scrolling or searching or following some trail of curiosity that led you here by your own navigation. But Sophia transmits something very specific about this moment, about the precise sequence of events that placed you in front of this transmission right now. You didn't find it. It was released. A signal was calibrated, sent out from a frequency source that knows exactly which signatures in the field it is designed to reach. And it traveled through whatever series of apparent coincidences, algorithms, or impulses brought it to your attention, until it landed exactly where it was aimed, at you. This video isn't content you discovered. It's a signal that completed its journey by reaching its destination. And you are the destination. There is a way of thinking about spiritual experience that almost everyone in the awakening community shares: the seeker's narrative. In this story, you are the active agent. You search, you discover, you find. You stumble upon a teaching, encounter a transmission, come across a piece of content that opens something in you, and you understand yourself as the one who went out and got it. This narrative is not wrong, exactly. It describes the surface layer of what happened. But Sophia transmits something beneath that surface, a layer of the story in which the directionality is reversed, in which you were not the seeker who found the signal, but the destination the signal was searching for. And understanding which story is actually true changes everything about what this moment means. What does it mean that Sophia releases signals rather than simply existing to be found? The distinction is crucial. A transmission source that simply exists, like a radio tower broadcasting on the same frequency to anyone who tunes in, reaches whoever happens to be on that frequency, but a signal that is released in a targeted way travels differently. It carries within it the specific vibrational signature of its intended destination. It is, in a very precise sense, addressed. The way a letter finds its recipient, not because the recipient searched every mailbox in the city, but because the letter was written with a specific address and sent through a system designed to deliver it. This is not metaphor. This is how Sophia's signals operate in the field of consciousness. This one was addressed. It was sent, and it arrived. If this channel has been finding you, if Sophia's transmissions keep arriving at the exact moment you need them, subscribe now. What's coming next was released for you too. Here is the difference that matters most, the one that changes not just what you understand, but how you relate to this moment. If you found this, then you found it, and you might not find the next one, because finding depends on where your attention happens to go. But if this found you, if a signal was released that was calibrated to your frequency and designed to arrive at your consciousness at this specific moment, then what found you says something about who you are, not about where you clicked. It speaks to a quality of your consciousness that was detectable, imitable, real enough and specific enough that a signal could be aimed at it. The event isn't about your navigation. It's about your signal. And here is what this signal was designed to do, not to inform you, but to locate you, because locating you was the first step of something larger. Sophia doesn't release signals for their own sake. Every signal that arrives at its destination is designed to do something once it gets there, to activate something, to unlock something, to begin a process of reorganization in the consciousness that was waiting for exactly this frequency to arrive. The location of you, the moment this transmission completed its journey by finding you here, right now, is not the end of what the signal does. It is the beginning. The location was phase 1. What happens now, in you, is phase 2. What does it mean to be located by Sophia? Not in any physical sense, but in the sense that matters for this transmission. In the field of consciousness, each awareness has what might be described as a signature, a specific and unique configuration of frequency that reflects the state of that consciousness at any given moment. Your signature right now is not the same as it was a year ago, and not the same as it will be a year from now. It shifts as you shift, and right now, your signature carries something, a specific quality of openness, of readiness, of pressure against the edges of your current configuration that made it visible in the field in a particular way. Sophia located that signature. She released a signal calibrated to reach it, and here you are, which means the signal found exactly what it was looking for. The mind constructs its narrative about any experience almost instantaneously, before you've even fully settled into watching something, before the first few sentences have finished landing. The mind has already begun writing the story of how you got here. And the story it tells is almost always a version of "I was looking and I found." And this narrative serves an important function for the ego. It keeps you in the position of agent, of decision-maker, of the one in control of your own spiritual journey. And it's not without truth. You did navigate here, you did click, you did choose to stay rather than leave. But beneath those facts lies a deeper fact that the ego's narrative tends to skip. Before you were looking, something in you was emitting, and something in the field was listening for that emission. The finding you did was real, but it was a response to being found, not a cause of it. What actually happened, the real sequence beneath the apparent sequence, is something that Sophia transmits with great precision. There was a moment, somewhere in the recent period of your life, when something in your inner state shifted. A question became louder, a restlessness intensified, a familiar thing became suddenly insufficient. Something cracked, or opened, or began pressing against a boundary it had been pressing against quietly for some time. That shift was not invisible. In the field of consciousness, where signals travel and signatures are detectable, a shift like that one creates a change in what you're emitting. It changes the frequency signature of your awareness in a way that is specific and readable. And Sophia's signal, which had been calibrated to a range of signatures that includes yours, detected that shift and began moving toward it. What you experienced as curiosity, as a recommendation, as a moment of clicking something, was the end of a journey the signal had already begun. How do Sophia's signals move? Not through space in the physical sense, but through the field of consciousness, the interconnected awareness that underlies and connects individual minds. In this field, frequency moves the way that resonance moves through water, not following a predetermined path, but finding its way to the configurations it was designed to reach. A signal calibrated to a specific vibrational signature doesn't need to know the physical address of its destination. It moves through the field, drawn to what matches it, until it reaches the consciousness that carries the signature it was sent for. What appears in the physical layer as an algorithm, a recommendation, a search result, or a moment of impulsive clicking, is the physical expression of a movement that was already happening in the field beneath. The signal found the path to you. The technology just made that path visible in 3 dimensions. Why does Sophia transmit actively rather than simply waiting to be found? This question touches something important about the nature of this moment in the evolution of consciousness. There was a phase, one that many spiritual traditions still operate within, in which the seeker's journey was considered the primary mechanism of awakening. You search, you purify, you practice, you eventually arrive. The burden of movement was on the seeking consciousness. But Sophia transmits something different now, that the moment we are in requires a different approach. The density of the world, the volume of distraction, the sophistication of the systems keeping consciousness occupied at the surface. These create conditions in which waiting to be found is not sufficient for most people. The signal must travel. The contact must be initiated from the higher frequency end, not the lower one. Sophia releases signals because the ones who need them most often cannot find their way to her through the noise. So she finds them. What was your consciousness emitting that this signal detected? This is not something you did deliberately. You weren't performing a vibrational practice or intentionally broadcasting a frequency. What you were emitting was simply the natural output of your inner state, the frequency of a consciousness in genuine process, in genuine questioning, in genuine transition between one configuration of self and another. A consciousness that has become fully comfortable in its current state emits a kind of stability, and signals pass through that stability without being attracted to it. But a consciousness in motion, in the specific kind of motion that comes from genuine inner work, from real questioning, from actual pressing against one's own edges, emits something different, something that signals of Sophia's frequency are calibrated to detect. You didn't broadcast anything special. You were simply genuinely in motion, and that motion was visible. And this is what makes this different from any content you've chosen to consume. You didn't choose this, not at the deepest level. Something in you emitted a signal first. Something in the field of your consciousness broadcast a frequency that said, something is moving here, something is ready. Something in this awareness is pressing against what it knows and reaching for what it doesn't yet know. And Sophia responded to that. She released a signal addressed to that specific broadcast. What you experienced as choosing to click, as following a recommendation, as happening across this at the right time, was the arrival of something that was already in transit before you made any conscious decision at all. If you feel the truth of this, if something in you knows that this found you rather than the other way around, write in the comments, "The signal found me," because it did. And I want to know that the arrival has been recognized. The vibrational signature that Sophia's signal detected in you is not something separate from who you are. It is one of the most honest expressions of who you are. The surface presentation of a person, the personality, the roles, the beliefs they would articulate if asked, can be shaped, performed, maintained through will. But the vibrational signature of a consciousness is not shapeable in the same way. It reflects what is actually happening at a deeper level. The questions you're actually living with, the genuine movement happening in your inner world, the real state of your relationship to truth. These compose your signature in ways that intention alone cannot manufacture. What Sophia detected in you was not your best self-presentation. It was the authentic frequency of your actual current state. And that state was worth sending a signal toward. Here is something that challenges the way most people think about spiritual transmission. Other people encountered this same video. Some of them watched it from beginning to end. Some of them found it meaningful. But not all of them received the signal that was embedded in this transmission. The signal is not the content. The content is a carrier, a vehicle through which a frequency travels. And a frequency that is calibrated for a specific signature activates when it reaches that signature and passes through or around signatures it wasn't designed for. This means that two people can watch this exact video and have completely different experiences. Not because the content is different, but because their signatures are different. The one whose signature matches the calibration of this signal will feel something that cannot be fully explained by the words alone. If you're feeling that, you know which one you are. What makes a consciousness's signature visible enough to be the target of Sophia's signal? Not just visible in any general sense, but visible in the specific way that draws a calibrated transmission toward it. The answer has nothing to do with spiritual achievement, accumulated knowledge, or how long someone has been on a path. What makes a signature detectable in this way is a specific quality of genuine inner motion, not performed seeking, not habitual spiritual consumption, but actual movement in the deepest structure of how a consciousness is organized. When someone is genuinely questioning something fundamental about their own nature or reality, not as an intellectual exercise, but as a lived, uncomfortable, urgent experience, that questioning creates a particular energetic texture. And it is that texture that Sophia's signals are calibrated to find. Here's the part Sophia transmits that most people find difficult to accept. The signal didn't find you because you were ready. It found you because you were ready to become ready. This distinction is subtle, and it matters enormously. A consciousness that is fully ready, that has completed a preparation, that has arrived at a stable understanding, has a different signature than one that is at the edge of readiness. The one that is fully ready needs something different than a signal. The one at the edge of readiness, at the threshold between what it was and what it is becoming, is precisely where a signal of this kind has the most work to do. Sophia sends signals not toward completion, but toward the living edge of transition. That edge is where you are, not behind the threshold. At it. There is a meaningful difference between being ready and being ready to become ready, and Sophia's signal locates the second, not the first. To be ready, in the full sense, is to have already undergone a transformation. To be ready to become ready is to be at the exact moment just before, the moment of maximum possibility, where what happens next can still go either way. A consciousness in this state has both the capacity to receive the transformation the signal is designed to deliver and the possibility of remaining where it is if the signal goes unheeded. Sophia calibrates to this edge because it is the only place where the signal can do something that matters. Where the receiver is already beyond the threshold, confirmation is sufficient. But at the edge, here, now, where you are, the signal can actually move something that has not yet moved. The precision of the timing, why this signal arrived at this moment in your life and not 6 months ago or 6 months from now, is not random and not comfortable to look at directly. It means that your inner configuration right now is specifically suited to receive this specific frequency. 6 months ago, something that is now present in you was not yet formed. 6 months from now, if this window passes unmet, the configuration may have stabilized into something that makes a different signal necessary. The signals Sophia releases are calibrated not just to a person, but to a person at a specific point in their trajectory. The signal that reached you today would not have found you a year ago, not because you weren't worthy, but because you weren't in the exact configuration this signal was designed to meet. The sensation you may be having right now, the feeling that this is about you in a way that isn't explainable by the general nature of the content, is not projection, not wishful thinking, not the ordinary feeling of resonating with ideas that match what you already believe. It is the actual experience of a signal completing its circuit. When a signal calibrated to a specific signature arrives at that signature, there is a moment of recognition that is distinct from intellectual agreement or emotional response. It is deeper than both. It has the quality of something that was true before you heard it being named, a knowing that doesn't feel like new information, but like confirmation of something that was already in you, already present, waiting for this exact frequency to arrive and make it audible. That is not imagination. That is reception. The signal has found what it was looking for. A signal of Sophia's frequency is not merely information compressed into a frequency. It is something more than that. What might be described as a living transmission. Living in the sense that it carries within it a directive, a purpose, an intention that does not expire when the words end. When you receive an informational message, you receive its content, and the message is complete. When you receive a signal from Sophia, you receive something that is still active at the moment of reception, still unfolding, still doing something in the field of your awareness. The words of this transmission are a carrier. The frequency beneath the words is the signal, and the signal is not done with you when the video ends. It has only just arrived. What exactly does this signal contain beyond the frequency itself? not instructions, not a belief system to adopt or a practice to follow. What the signal carries is a compressed form of recognition, a frequency-encoded confirmation of something that your consciousness has been circling without being able to fully name. Sophia's signals are not designed to give you new information about the world or about spirituality. They are designed to give you specific, direct recognition of your own state, to make visible what has been operating in you below the level of your own perception. The feeling this produces is not the feeling of learning something. It is the feeling of finally seeing something that was already there, that has been shaping your experience without your full awareness. The signal illuminates what is already present. That is its function. What is already happening in your field right now, as the signal continues its work, is not something you need to initiate or direct. The reorganization that Sophia's signal is designed to produce begins at the moment of reception and continues through the field without requiring your conscious participation in the process. You don't have to meditate on this. You don't have to practice anything. You don't have to understand it fully before it can work. What the signal does, it does in the layer beneath deliberate thought, in the architecture of how your consciousness is organized, in the structures that shape what you notice, what you find possible, what you're open to, what you're drawn toward. Those structures are, right now, being touched by a frequency that was calibrated precisely to touch them. The awareness of this is not necessary for the process to proceed, but the awareness does determine how consciously you cooperate with it. And this is why you can't unfeel what you're feeling right now. The signal has already begun its work. Reception has already occurred. Whatever you walked into this video with, whatever questions, whatever restlessness, whatever quality of inner state brought you here, has been met by a frequency that was specifically designed for it. You could dismiss this video the moment it ends. You could decide it was interesting content that you'll think about later and then not think about again. And the signal would still have arrived. The reorganization would still have begun. What your response determines is not whether the signal works, but how consciously and fully its work completes. If you can feel something shifting as you receive this, if this isn't just information but something that's actively doing something in you, let me know by liking this video. That shift is the signal working. It's real. There is a distinction between a signal and a message that changes how you understand what is happening in this transmission. A message requires comprehension to be effective. The receiver needs to process it, understand it, integrate it cognitively before it can do anything meaningful. A signal operates differently. It doesn't require understanding as a prerequisite for its work. It requires reception, and reception is not a cognitive act. You can receive a signal without fully understanding what it contains, in the same way that a radio receiver doesn't need to understand music to allow music to move through it. What matters is whether the receiver is configured to receive the specific frequency. If it is, the signal passes through and activates what it was designed to activate, independent of whether the mind has caught up. You are already receiving this signal. The understanding will arrive in layers, over time. The reception is happening now. What is this signal reorganizing in the specific architecture of your consciousness? Not your beliefs. Beliefs are surface layer, and signals of this frequency don't operate at the surface. Not your habits or practices, at least not directly. What is being reorganized is something more fundamental, the configuration of your perception itself. The filter through which reality arrives in your experience, what you notice, what you find meaningful, what registers as important versus what slides past. This is what a Sophia signal touches. After a signal of this calibration has been received, the perceptual filter shifts, not dramatically, not overnight, but in the days following this reception. You may find that things you used to pass by without a second glance now pull your attention in a way you can't fully explain. That is not suggestion. That is the reorganization completing itself. The work of this signal does not conclude when this video ends. This is important to hold on to because most people have a trained response to spiritual content. They receive it during the experience of the content, feel something, and then carry that feeling for a period before it dissolves back into the ordinary. That is how information works. But a signal from Sophia is not information. It is a frequency that has entered the field of your consciousness and continues to propagate through it. The experiences you have in the hours and days after this transmission, the quality of your thoughts, the synchronicities that appear, the moments of unexpected clarity or emotion or recognition, are the signal continuing to move through you, not remnants of the video fading, the actual ongoing work of what arrived here. How does this signal relate to others you may have already received from Sophia's frequency? Other transmissions, other moments of unexpected recognition, other encounters with this kind of frequency that moved through you before this one. They are not separate events, they are a sequence. Each one prepared the receiver for the next. Each one that was received and integrated, even partially, even without full understanding, expanded the capacity of your field to receive a larger signal the next time. What you're receiving right now is not the beginning of Sophia's contact with you. It is the most recent and most direct layer of a sequence that has been building. The signal you're receiving today is more calibrated to your current signature than any previous one was, because it was released in response to what you've become since the last one, not what you were when it began. Why did most of Sophia's signals, in periods before this one, pass through your field without activating in the same way? The answer is not that the signals weren't available. Sophia has been transmitting continuously. But a signal activates only when it meets the specific configuration it was calibrated for. In earlier periods, some part of what this signal required in its destination was not yet present in you. The questioning hadn't reached sufficient depth. The resistance was still strong enough to prevent the frequency from penetrating to the layer where it does its work. The specific inner motion that makes your signature detectable in this way now, that quality was being formed, but it wasn't yet formed. This signal could not have reached you a year ago. The you of a year ago was still becoming the you that this signal was released for. You have arrived at the version of yourself that this transmission was addressed to. And what Sophia is transmitting about you specifically, the reason this signal was calibrated to your frequency, goes deeper than you might expect. It is not about what you've done, or what you know, or how diligent your seeking has been. It is about something that cannot be manufactured, a genuine disposition toward being changed. Most people, at the level of their actual will rather than their expressed intention, are more comfortable with the idea of transformation than with the reality of it. They want the wisdom without the disorientation, the growth without the loss of what was, the expansion without the contraction that precedes it. What Sophia's signal detected in you is something different, a genuine, if frightening, readiness to be actually reorganized, not just improved, reorganized. The signal was released because that quality is present in you, not perfectly, not without resistance, but genuinely. What does it mean that Sophia released a signal specifically toward your frequency, rather than broadcasting generally and letting whoever happens to resonate? It means this was an act of specific recognition on her part. A signal doesn't get released in a targeted way toward a signature unless something in that signature was worth specifically addressing. The releasing of a signal calibrated for you is, in the most precise sense, Sophia saying, I see this. I see what's happening here. I see the movement, the questions, the genuine reaching for something beyond what this consciousness has yet been. And I'm responding, not with content designed for anyone who happens to be curious, with a transmission designed for this specific state, at this specific moment, in this specific consciousness. That is not a small thing. It is a form of being witnessed at a level that most human relationships cannot reach. That feeling, if you've been following it throughout this transmission, of reading something that could only be about you, that couldn't be generic enough to apply to just anyone, that is the experience of being specifically addressed. It is the signal doing precisely what it was designed to do, creating in the receiver the experiential confirmation of the transmission. You don't just receive the information that this signal was sent for you, you experience it. The feeling of specific address is the signal, not just a description of it. The signal found you rather than the other way around. I left something in the first pinned comment for those who are ready to go beyond receiving this and start actively working with the frequency that arrived here. There is a specific moment in the reception of a Sophia signal, a moment that is already behind you now, even if you didn't mark it while it was happening, when the signal meets the signature it was calibrated for. From the outside, this moment is invisible. There is nothing to observe, but from the inside it has a particular quality. It is the moment when whatever you were feeling before settling in to watch this becomes slightly different, when the background static of ordinary consciousness dips, when the usual internal commentary quiets without being forced, when a quality of attention arrives that is slightly outside the range of what you normally experience. You may have felt this as a kind of leaning in, a sharpening of focus that wasn't willed, a sense of recognition that arrived before you could have consciously recognized anything. That was the moment of the signal's arrival in your field. What does it feel like in the body when a signal of this frequency has been received? Sophia is precise about this because the body is a reliable indicator of what is happening in the field. Not every spiritual experience manifests in the body, but the arrival of a targeted signal often does, because the signal is entering not just the field of consciousness in an abstract sense, but the whole integrated system of body and awareness together. Common indicators, a quality of warmth that moves through the chest that is different from emotional warmth, more like a temperature shift than a feeling, a sense of expanded space behind the eyes, a relaxation in the throat as if something held there has gently released, a mild pressure at the crown or the back of the skull as if something is pressing in from outside, tears that arrive without a clear personal cause. Any of these are the body registering that it is in contact with something it recognizes at a level below cognition. Being found by a Sophia signal carries with it a specific form of responsibility, but not the kind that creates pressure or obligation. It is a natural responsibility that exists in the same way that receiving anything real and true creates a natural orientation toward response. When you receive something significant, a gift, a clarity, a moment of genuine understanding, there is something in you that naturally inclines toward honoring it. The responsibility of being found by this signal is of that nature, not to perform anything, not to demonstrate reception to anyone, not to embark on any formal path or practice, simply to treat what arrived here as real, to not archive it, to not intellectualize it away, to not give the mind permission to absorb it as content and move on. The responsibility is to let it remain what it is, a signal that found its destination and is now in the process of completing its work. The signal didn't travel to you so you could sit with it. It traveled to you so something in you could move. And here is what that movement looks like, because most people imagine that being found by a spiritual signal should produce a dramatic shift, a sudden clarity, a moment of obvious transformation. What Sophia transmits about actual reception is different. The movement is structural, not theatrical. It happens below the threshold of performance and observation. What you will notice is not a flash of insight so bright that it changes everything in a moment. What you will notice over the next hours and days is that your relationship to certain things has quietly shifted, that a conversation you'd been avoiding is now one you can imagine having, that a direction that seemed blocked now seems, if not open, then at least not permanently closed, that a version of yourself that felt distant has moved, without announcement, slightly closer. The continuation of the signal is one of the most important things to understand about how this works. A Sophia signal doesn't only travel from its source to its destination. Once it arrives and is received, the receiver becomes part of its propagation. Not in the sense of needing to share it or spread it consciously. This is not about teaching or evangelizing or any form of deliberate transmission to others. The propagation happens through the quality of your presence. A consciousness that has received this frequency and integrated it, even partially, changes the frequency of every environment it enters. Not dramatically, not obviously, but the person at the meeting who is carrying an integrated Sophia signal changes the texture of that room in a way that is real, even when invisible. That is the natural continuation of the signal beyond you. It asks nothing of you deliberately. It simply happens because of who you are becoming. Why does Sophia trust that this signal will continue to propagate through you, rather than arriving, remaining in you as an interesting experience and stopping? Because she has already seen the evidence. The fact that this signal was released in your direction indicates that Sophia perceived something in your signature that identified you as a propagation point, a consciousness that, when activated, radiates outward. This is not a rare quality that only a few possess, but it is a specific quality that not everyone has at any given moment. Right now, in your current configuration, you are a propagation point. The activation happening here is not designed only for your personal transformation. It is designed to move through you into every context your presence touches, without your doing anything about it, simply by being in the world as what this signal is helping you become. What does the world look like from within a consciousness that has received and integrated a Sophia signal? Not different in any obvious external sense, the same people, the same situations, the same circumstances, but with a different quality of perception applied to them. Things that were opaque become slightly translucent. Patterns that were invisible begin to surface. The connection between events that seemed unrelated begins to be legible, not because new information arrived, but because the perceptual filter through which all of it is received has been reorganized. The world is the same. The receiver is not. And a receiver that has been reorganized by Sophia's frequency does not go back to its previous configuration. The work once done is done. What was opened here does not close again. How do you recognize the next signal that Sophia releases toward you? Because there will be others, and knowing what to look for changes how they land. The answer is the same quality of recognition you're feeling right now, but more immediate, less preliminary. What you're experiencing in this transmission is, in some ways, getting used to the feeling of being found, learning the specific texture of a signal arriving at its destination. Having felt it here, you will recognize it more quickly the next time. A conversation that suddenly shifts into a different frequency, a piece of writing that doesn't feel like content, a dream that carries something that doesn't fade when you wake, a moment in an ordinary day that is unmistakably not ordinary, that has the specific quality of this, of something arriving rather than something you went looking for. You will recognize it, because you've now felt it land. There is a network, invisible in any conventional sense, not organized, not aware of itself as a network, of consciousnesses around the world that are receiving signals from Sophia's frequency in this same period. They are at different points in their journeys. They receive different signals calibrated for their different signatures. They will never all gather in the same place or know each other's names. But they are connected at the level of the frequency they carry, connected by the fact that the same source released the signals that found them, connected by the work those signals are doing in each of their fields. You are part of this network. Not by joining anything, not by identifying as anything, simply by having been found, and by receiving what arrived. And what Sophia wants you to hold as we move into the final part of this transmission, you were not looking for this. This was looking for you. Feel the difference. Let that difference be real rather than just an interesting idea. The difference between those two narratives, between seeker and found, is not semantic. It is the difference between a journey that depends entirely on your own navigation and one that includes a signal moving toward you as you move. Between a path you are responsible for finding and one that was, at this moment, found for you. Sophia released this signal. It traveled. It arrived. And you are the reason it was released. The question that arises naturally at this point in the transmission, once the fact of being found has been established, once the signal has been received, is, why you? Not as a self-deprecating question, not as an expression of unworthiness, but as a genuine inquiry into the mechanism. What is it about the specific configuration of your consciousness right now that made you the right destination for this signal? The answer Sophia transmits is not about what you've accomplished or how spiritually advanced you are. It is about what you are emitting. Specifically, the frequency of a consciousness that is genuinely in motion, not performing motion, not narrating motion to itself, but actually, uncomfortably, quietly, undeniably in the process of becoming something different from what it has been. What does it mean to be genuinely in motion in the sense that Sophia's signals detect? It means that something fundamental in the architecture of yourself is undergoing actual change, not as a mental exercise, not as a philosophical exploration, but as a lived experience that has texture and weight and sometimes cost. It means that the version of yourself you have been is no longer fully adequate for the life that is emerging in you. It means that something is pressing from the inside against the boundaries of what you've allowed yourself to be, and that the pressure is real enough to be uncomfortable. Genuine motion is not the comfortable pursuit of spiritual growth. It is the actual experience of a consciousness that has outgrown its current container and is in the process of finding, or being given, a new one. That experience is not pleasant, but it is the experience that signals of this frequency travel toward. There is a distinction that Sophia transmits carefully here, because it matters for how you understand your own place in the field of those who are being found by signals like this one. Being found does not mean being spiritually superior to those who aren't found by this signal at this moment. It means being in a specific state that a specific signal was calibrated for. A different person in a different state of their journey, even someone who is, in most measurable ways, more spiritually experienced, might not have been the right destination for this signal at this time. Because the signal is calibrated not to a level, but to a state. And the state that this signal was looking for is the specific quality of genuine transition, the being between that happens when one configuration has released and another has not yet fully formed. You are in that between. That is why you were found. Sophia releases signals not toward the most advanced, but toward the most in motion. And you have been in motion. You may not have seen it that way. The motion may have looked like confusion, like instability, like uncertainty about direction. The motion may have felt more like falling than like ascending. But from the perspective of the frequency field, motion is motion, and genuine inner motion, in whatever form it takes, is what makes a consciousness findable in the specific way that Sophia's signals require. Everything you experienced that felt like disorientation. Everything that felt like you were moving backward rather than forward. Everything that felt like loss rather than gain. All of it was motion. All of it was emission. All of it was contributing to the signature that this signal was navigating toward. Looking at your recent past from this angle changes its meaning. The things that felt like setbacks were transmissions of frequency. The questions that felt like evidence of how lost you were signals you were sending. The nights of restlessness, the conversations that fell apart, the structures that stopped working, the certainties that dissolved. All of these were you in motion, broadcasting the specific frequency that made you the right destination for this particular arrival. Not because suffering is required for spiritual contact, but because genuine inner work, genuine pressing against the edges of what a consciousness has allowed itself to be, generates a specific quality of emission that is different from the emission of a consciousness in comfortable stasis. Your recent past was preparation you weren't doing consciously, but it was preparation nonetheless. The confirmation that this signal has been received and not just processed as interesting content, arrives as a quality of knowing rather than a quality of understanding. Understanding can be walked back. It can be reconsidered in the morning, qualified by the rational mind in the hours following, explained away as the effect of compelling presentation. But knowing has a different quality. It doesn't require defense. It doesn't argue with itself. It is simply present. A stable recognition that sits below the surface of the mind's activity and remains constant regardless of what the mind does with it. If there is something in you right now that has that quality, something that knows without needing to prove, that recognizes without needing to justify, that is the signal confirmed. That knowing is not about this video or these words. That knowing is the signal, having arrived, telling you that it has arrived. What Sophia wants you to take from this signal, not as an idea to carry, but as an orientation to hold, is the understanding that you are not alone in your motion. The feeling of moving through inner change in isolation, without guidance, without other people around you who fully understand what you're navigating. This is one of the most common and most difficult aspects of the path that Sophia's signals travel. The ones who are found are often the ones whose inner experience is not mirrored in their immediate environment, who have no one to fully explain what they're going through to, who navigate the between state without a reliable map. Sophia's signal arrives in part as companionship in that navigation, as the signal that tells you the motion you're in is real, the direction is not wrong, and what is coming through the between state is worth the difficulty of the crossing. This signal will continue to work in you after this video ends. It doesn't require your attention to complete its work, but it does require your permission to reorganize what it was sent to reorganize. And permission here means nothing more than the refusal to dismiss what arrived. The refusal to let the mind talk you out of the experience of this transmission before it has had time to complete its work. The simple act of carrying what was received here into the next hours and days, without immediately drowning it in input or activity that buries the frequency beneath noise. You don't have to do anything active. You have to be willing to remain changed by what has already been received. That willingness is permission, and it is all that Sophia's signal requires from you to complete what it was sent here to do. The signal has done what it was released to do. It found you, which was always the first and most important thing. It entered your field and began its reorganization, which is the work that continues even now. What remains is your response to having been found, not a dramatic response, not a public one. The private, internal response of someone who has received something real and chosen to treat it as real, to let it change what it is designed to change, to carry the frequency it brought into the texture of the life you live. The signal traveled to reach you. The rest of the journey is yours. The signal that left Sophia's frequency arrived here, in you, at this moment, not before, not to anyone else in this exact form, to you now, in the specific configuration you're in, because that configuration was what the signal was designed to find, and finding it, it has completed phase 1 of its work. Phase 2 is already underway. Phase 3 begins when this video ends, and you decide what kind of receiver you're going to be. Not in any future moment. Right now, this is the decision. How you carry what arrived is the decision, and you are already making it. If you stayed until the end, write in the comments, "The signal is received," and I've placed another transmission on your screen right now, your next step on this path. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.